What a blessing it is for a beloved character to receive a deft and fitting conclusion that removes the possibility of many years later sequels. Like a lot of people, I really love the original 3 Indiana Jones films. Now, was I expecting Dial of Destiny to live up even close to the classics? Nah, that's ridiculous. However, I'll admit a certain level of excitement as more information was released about Dial of Destiny. With James Mangold directing, I was excited at the possibility of a Logan for the Jones film series. Mangold had proved he could lovingly bring a fitting conclusion to a big blockbuster franchise beloved character. Mangold has cinematic film chops. There isn't a single film I've seen of his that wasn't technically excellent. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who is excellent in everything she's in, and is a far better choice than Shia LaBeouf as a protege to Indiana. Mads Mikkelsen as Indy's new adversary, a Nazi scientist. Harrison Ford returning for what he states will more than likely be his final adventure. So, where did it go wrong? And why did it go so wrong? Because I did not enjoy this movie. Sitting in the cinema at the edge of boredom, I got this feeling of dread. I really disliked this film. For me, all of this comes down to pretty much one major fault: the execution. On paper, Indiana Jones on horseback being chased through a 1969 Moon Day parade by Nazis is a great idea. And yet, in practice, it feels so ingenuine. A CGI mess lacking any gravitas of what made the action scenes good in the original trilogy. It is so distinctly unlike what any of the previous films feel like, including Crystal Skull, in execution, that I'm not sure I can call it even an homage. This issue of stodgy execution follows the film through its entirety. Lots of people love the opening flashback train crash sequence, and yes, the de-aged Harrison Ford looks pretty good. Except anytime you see what a real face looks like. That's not even the worst issue. I could buy the face if when he opened his mouth to speak, it didn't sound like an 80-year-old man. It's way too long, and the thematic purpose isn't justified. A de-aged CGI Indiana Jones running on top of a CGI train is just not how this movie needs to start. On top of all this, the opening action scene could be cut, and you would hardly lose anything from Dial of Destiny overall. The same can't be said for any other Indiana Jones film. Phoebe Waller-Bridge has screen presence and isn't an 80-year-old man, so the action scenes she's in look okay. Her character Helena Shaw is also handled quite gracefully, especially compared to Mutt. I feel a legitimate connection between Jones and Shaw. People who think Helena Shaw is the reason this movie sucks are idiots. Like, you're entitled to your opinion, but she is by far the best part of this film. The same can't be said for Teddy, her forgettable child sidekick. He doesn't hold a candle at all to Short Round. I'd be happy if he was cut from the film. Speaking of Short Round, Key One's absence is felt, especially since he's back doing big movies. Are you telling me they couldn't even get him in for one day of shooting? Like, what? They have this big sentimental reunion of major characters in the film, and the fact he isn't even mentioned is just painful. I'm heading towards spoiler territory, so beware if you care. This is a movie that lacks any love for its characters. the movie gently nudges towards this idea that Indy's time is up and the world has moved ahead of him, but there's no genuine reflection for the character, nothing even close to what Last Crusade offered up. The idea of the Dial of Destiny and that you could go back in time and save people who you've lost is tremendously underutilized and squandered. Indy has lost his son Mutt, hilariously written out of the film by dying in the Vietnam War. Indy has lost his wife, his father, his best friends. The movie is massively missing any real emotional core. When time travel is a concept at the forefront of the film, why wasn't a decision made to have Indy have a proper emotional arc? Reflect on the people he's lost along the way, finally, at the end of his life. The villain wanting to go back in time to kill Hitler so he could do a better job as a Nazi is pretty good. However, almost all of the dialogue is awful. There's no memorable one-liners or clever bits. There is one shorthand for when something funny happens. Someone gets punched. So many people get punched in this film as like a literal punchline, and it just gets old so quickly. The sequence in Tangiers at the bar where everyone is bidding for the dial I thought was actually pretty good. The following car chases through the cluttered streets on paper works, but in execution it's so lifeless, so lacking in any practical filmmaking. It's funny though, because I don't love Ford vs Ferrari. However, I can't deny the absolute brilliance in the presentation and filmmaking, especially in the car action sequences of that film. You can pretty much pick out any sequence in the first hour and 20 minutes of this film, and on paper, it works. However, the lackluster CGI, the shots, the editing are not good, and all encompass this feeling of lifeless execution. Okay, big time spoiler time. I'm not going to talk about this for too long because everyone pretty much agrees that this part is weird, but at the climax, they literally time travel into 214 BC, and it's an incredible jump in the shark moment, just like the alien spaceship in A Crystal Skull. It's bad. It's really bad. It's everything I already disliked, but especially the CGI just goes into overdrive. 80-year-old Harrison Ford talking to an ancient Greek man in a toga with a fake green screen city behind him is just not how I want any of my films to end. That's not to say the previous films don't have these unexplainable, mythical moments towards the end. It's just the original three do it so tastefully and in a manner that for the character is almost like plausible deniability. It's smaller scale and happens almost in a void. Here we have a plane traveling over the siege of Syracuse, getting arrows shot at it, and it's too much to swallow. It's completely farcical. Nothing ever ends. God forbid a hero is able to ride off into the sunset with a fitting, meaningful conclusion. Dial of Destiny has so little substance to give us for its incredibly long runtime. This is a film that should be full of emotion as we say goodbye to a character so many people love, and yet the emotional moments are lacking. There is zero examination of the character. The filmmaking is absent of any of the magic Spielberg instilled in any of the others. We're in franchise hell. Heroes can never die. Money will always topple any integrity. We're eternally chasing nostalgia, trying to recreate that spark of joy and creativity these properties once gave us. without these studios understanding what made the original property so good. The uniqueness and originality. With Across the Spider-Verse and Guardians 3, I felt a legitimate joy from the cinema, with the writing and consideration put into these characters. But, most importantly, they have heart. Then along comes the Flash and Dial of Destiny to remind us everything is f***ed. Like seriously, what are we doing here? May Barbie and Oppenheimer save movie storytelling.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe